Good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of the Lunchtime Learnings. Delighted and very grateful to be joined by my arch nemesis, Peter Rawlings, who we came across. We touched paths many years ago whilst you were at Foxtons and I was at Green & Co. Thoroughly enjoyed it at the time. We were discussing it offline, so I don't think we'll share those practices today because the world is very different. But Peter, thank you so much for your time. Incredibly grateful. I know you're a man in demand all the time. So
I used to be.
Well, you are in my eyes. So thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure.
And thank you for watching, whether you're watching now or whether you're on replay. Thanks for watching. So Peter, how did you get into a state agency in the first place? What's your story?
Well, I don't think anyone wakes up on their 16th birthday and thinks, I know, I want to be an estate agent. It just sort of happened, really. I didn't go to university, probably because I couldn't, but I knew very early on I wasn't going to go to university. So I messed around. I did a ski season. I went to school in America for a year. I came back. I got a job selling fish. It was the literally worst job in the world. I got in at 6 a.m. This is in London, in Chelsea Farmers Market in London. I took the job because it came with a flat and a company 90cc Honda. I got in at 6 a.m, killed and gutted 200 trout, biked them out to restaurants. This is rain or shine, winter or summer. And went back, opened the shop. There was a big pool of trout swimming around in a big swimming pool. Someone comes in, I said, I want that one. Dig it out, whack it on the head, kill and gut it, and give it to them. And I do not like killing things at the best of times. Anyway, it got me into London, into a job. I make the point to my kids, you've got to do shitty bloody things to make things happen. And if I hadn't have done that, an old boy, an old estate agent, I'd love to know who he was. I don't know. Walking through the market one day said, why don't you apply for this? Little advert from the Estates Gazette, and it was a company called Lane Fox, who were unbelievably posh. I was the only one that hadn't been to Eton in the whole department, country houses based in London. I did that for 3 years, learning the ropes, doing all the shitty jobs, making coffee, going to pick up maps. It was great, but it wasn't. I was earning £4,250 a year, no commission. I've still got one of my pay slips, £264 a month. Whew. Those were the days. Anyway, and then a mate of mine used to play squash with John Hunt, and this was a shitty little business well, not shitty, but it was small and hyper aggressive in Notting Hill, and he was opening in Fulham, and this was late 85, late 85, and so I went to chat with him, and I got on well with him. He's obviously a man on a mission, and I could identify with that. And I went from working 9 till 5, 5 days a week, till 9 till 9, 7 days a week, which again was extraordinary. But my God, did you learn stuff? That's how I got into agency.
Okay. So actually, what did you learn from killing fish? There's a great, in fact, I don't know if you've ever seen it, the Seattle Fish Company. And it's a great, if people are watching this, look them up. And also if you can find something called Fish, and it's a book as well, and it's an amazing video, and it just shows you the energy and the excitement that they create with fish. I can imagine you doing that now.
Well, I'm not sure it was that. It was a means to an end. I mean, it was a horrible job. There was no hot water in this place. I was in the basement of a mansion block in Chelsea, and there was a fucking great swimming pool. And I used to literally haul them out, chuck them on the floor, go around, bash them on the head, kill and gut them, bag them up, get them out to restaurants. So what did I learn? I learned that you have to do shitty things in order to get on in life, and you have to do them well. I could have easily given up that job after a week. It was a painful experience. The other thing I used to do is some of these restaurants had live fish. So they had live fish swimming around in tanks. And so I literally had panniers on the back of the motorbike, and I used to get a plastic bag full of water, chuck the trout in, and belt up to the West End, hoping desperately that they'd stay alive until I got in to the restaurant. So it was an extraordinary time, but God, we had fun, and as I said, it came with a flat in Holland Park. Well, Upper Addison Gardens. It was more Shepherd's Bush than Holland Park, probably, and a company motorbike. So I was happy.
Okay, so going to Foxtons in Notting Hill and Fulham, working for John Hunt, what were the lessons that you learned from John and that business? Because that was, or still is, maybe not how it was when you and John were there,
No,
but you know, you built up an incredible business there. One that, you know, agents, I'm sure up and down the country admired, have copied you, your systems and your processes. So what were your learnings with John?
well, I think if I can go back one step to Lane Fox, what I learned from Lane Fox is how to deal with people. They were very, as I said, very posh, charming people, very effective. And I learned from a guy called Mickey Wiggin, who was my first boss, who was eccentric and looking back completely bonkers, but he was fabulous. He was a brilliant man and a brilliant estate agent. So I learned a lot from him about how to deal with people. What I learned from John was attention to detail. John would never put up with anything that wasn't right. And I am painfully boring about things that aren't right. And I go back and I go back and I go back, making sure they're right. You know, from the typeface on a letter to, you know, the color of fonts. I mean, I hope most business owners do that anyway. But if you put up with stuff that's wrong, and no full stop, lack of initials when you're writing to someone, making sure that you're writing to the right person, the spelling of their surname, all that sort of stuff, all that builds to make a great business. And that's what John did. He was relentless in his, you know, I mean, don't ever think John was sort of a wealthy guy swanning around doing nothing. You know, whatever I did in the mornings, which was go to an 8 o'clock Monday morning meeting in every office, he was in another one. So he was a complete, fully hands-on bloke, and I learned enormous amounts from him.
Do you think you're born with that, or that's something that was, you know, throughout his upbringing was, I suppose, disciplined into him? Because I know he was in the army, so
yeah,
the structure and discipline come from there.
I would think so. He was gonna hunt, so he wasn't a colonel or anything. His father was a colonel, so he had quite a strange upbringing. It was quite, you know, moving around a lot. But he wasn't given anything, and I think that's fairly key. I was born on a farm. My dad was a tenant farmer, and you know, it wasn't a wealthy upbringing at all. And whatever we got, we had to work for. And I sincerely believe that is, if you're given too much, and I'm desperately trying to not make that mistake with my kids. If you're given too much, it takes away the grit, the determination to make it for yourself. So if you haven't got anything, frankly, you have to go out to work. You have to make money. You have to do things that you are tough and unpleasant, because otherwise you don't pay the rent.
Yeah, 100%. I've just started listening on Audible today, Eddie Hearn's book, Relentless. And
is it good?
And about, yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. But you know, he starts off actually, you know, Barry Hearn came from a council estate,
Yeah.
and you know, he built up from absolutely nothing. Eddie was born into it, but he wanted to prove to his dad that he could do the hard work before he went to go and set up partnership with his dad. And fascinating. Really good.
Relentless is a good word. It's a word I use a lot, and I think you've got to be relentless in business. And my God, it must be tough. I'm reasonably pleased I'm not running a business at the moment, but it must be tough. And you know, only the strong survive, or whatever the word is. But the relentlessness of life at the moment in business, I would guess, is really tough. And we will see people fall by the wayside, and I think that'll be. It's what happens. It's nature. It's life. But the ones that don't will be relentless.
Okay, so let's just dissect that a little bit. what does Relentless then mean to you in business? Because you were incredibly relentless at Foxtons. I'm sure you're incredibly relentless when you bought Marsh and Parsons and made that into a phenomenal business as well. It already had a good name, but I'm sure you took it to another level as well.
It was a good name. It was incredibly sleepy. It was a wonderful name. That's why I bought it. That's why you buy a brand, is because it's got a nice reputation. But it was it was like stepping back into Victorian times.
Okay, so a few people that have joined us, so let's just welcome them. So Andrea from Fife in Scotland, thanks very much. Chris from Worthing, thank you. Sarah from the Lake District, thanks for joining. Mark, I think in Essex. Emma, Tricia, thanks very much for joining, really grateful. So coming back to relentlessness, what does that mean to you?
For me, as the boss, it meant everyone talks about work-life balance and all that sort of stuff. I didn't really have a work-life balance. It was mostly work. I left at 4:45 in the morning. I got home at 8:30 at night. If I ever left before 6:30 at 7 in the evening, I locked my door. This was at Marsh and Parsons. I locked my door in the evenings. But if I ever left before then, I wouldn't lock my door. I'd leave my door open, because I absolutely, and this is probably a problem for mine, but I did not want to see people to see me leaving before them. And I know this day and age, you're not supposed to do that, and it's all about being in the moment. But I felt that as the leader and the boss, I absolutely had to be there and work harder than anybody else. And that's frankly that's how I did it, because if I'm there, then everyone's there, and if everyone's there, they're normally working hard. And I sincerely believe that you don't get anywhere in life just by sort of trolling along and turning up. And if I'm doing that, then it feeds down, it seeps down. It's poison that seeps down into the organization if the boss is not. I mean, for years I read religiously every single piece of advertising that came out of Marsh and Parsons. Used to take me probably 5 or 6 hours with all the newspaper adverts, because if it goes out with a typo in it, I'm freaking out.
So where did you get that attention to detail from as well?
Probably John Hunt. You don't put up with stiff stuff that's wrong. You really don't. In offices, I mean, it's constantly amazes me how many offices I go past and there's a light bulb gone, or a thing is hanging off, or all that sort of stuff. To my mind, and maybe I'm unusual with this, but if I'm a customer looking in, I'm thinking, these guys don't care. I can see that their front doorstep has had something spilt in it weeks ago, and it's not done. I mean, we used to be out cleaning the windows in the morning if these were the Foxtons days. We weren't very popular if people had been throwing things at the windows. So you went out and did it. Equally, boards. We used to have a board run every week. I used to get all the managers for an area together in my car. We used to go around and check boards were straight, up, clean, every week.
Amazing.
So, detailed.
Amazing. It was me that threw the eggs. I apologise profusely.
It could have been as well.
That's terrible.
That's North London behaviour for you.
Yeah, obviously. St John's would have made a vow. Who would have thought it, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
So, relentlessness, attention to detail, and actually something you touched on, what you tolerate, you get more of. So there's a lot of people that struggle here. They do tolerate a lot of stuff. As a leader, what suggestions can you give to people to help them?
I probably couldn't get away with some of the stuff I did now. I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but I'm telling you how it is. I banned beards. So that's
where David Pollard got it from.
It's probably me. I just think they look awful. This was a few years ago now, and I certainly couldn't now. I know that I'm a dinosaur, but I banned beards because it just wasn't right as far as concerned. I banned brown shoes with dark suits. Don't forget where we worked. We worked in central London. We were operating in a very exclusive part of the world. So, and frankly, it probably wasn't as trendy as it is now, but I absolutely banned it. And how did I do that? Okay, when someone started at Marsh and Parsons, their first morning, the first 2 hours of that morning, the lucky things, was with me. And I went through a 2-hour presentation of where we come from, where we are now, what our aspirations were, the numbers. There's no secrets. All, they're all in all the accounts. How our profits were going up, the turnover was going up, the people we employ were going up. Blah 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 blah. The last 20 minutes was what I expect of you, and it was absolutely always be on time, always. And if you're not on time, I'm gonna be pissed off. I used to lock doors when people were late for meetings, so they couldn't come into the office. Always look $1 million. So I used to go through. I wouldn't put up with people. We all wore ties. I wouldn't put up with people who had a tie with their top button undone. I wouldn't put up with dirty shoes. I'd send people home for dirty shoes, or they'd have to go and buy a shoe cleaning kit. I wouldn't put up with people coming in unshaven. So if they are obviously unshaven, obviously they didn't have beard, so they couldn't say, "Oh, I'm growing a beard." I wouldn't put up with girls coming in looking, obviously hadn't washed their hair, hadn't put their makeup on, weren't looking $1 million. So all that builds to an attitude within a person, then an office, then an organization. And so everything fed into that structure, and it was the culture of the business. I mean, I wasn't. It sounds like I was an ogre, and sometimes I was an ogre, because if you put up with that sort of stuff, and people do come in and they look crap and they're hungover and they're looking dreadful, I'd send them home. And if I didn't send them home, everyone would think, well, he got away with it, I'll do that next week. And it does that. One of my favorite expressions with people is, I'm not a mind reader. You have to tell me what you think. I'll tell you what I think, and I'm absolutely happy for you to tell me what you think, no problem. But I'm not a mind reader. And so I think openness, and obviously, you're not going to probably go up and tell your boss you think he's a complete bloody idiot, but openness generally, I think, is extremely healthy and builds a fantastic culture. And the opposite is a culture that just is sort of mean and just closed and rather sort of unpleasant. And that leads to staff leaving and all sorts of nasty behavior. So it builds, but it's not a difficult build. It's just a relentless build.
Yeah, coming back to that word relentless again. So we're joined by Matthew Fine, and Matthew Fine's dad was actually my first boss at Gross Fine. So my father would send them home to shave.
Right.
In fact, there was a funny story about Matthew's father. So I'm going to share it, Matthew. There was a guy there. I won't mention his surname. There was a guy there called Kevin, and Kevin had worked there for about 2 or 3 years. And Matthew's dad decided to actually see whether he had the necessary qualifications. So he said to him, "Can you come in tomorrow with your GCSE certificates?" And he didn't have any GCSEs. So he came in the next day. He said, "Look, I put my hands up. I've got no GCSEs whatsoever." And he kept him on for at least being good, for at least telling him that. God, that brings going back about 30 odd years. Blimey. There you go. Matthew said it's his fault. Yeah, most probably.
Quite right.
Matthew.
I certainly don't think you need GCSEs to be an estate agent.
Well, I got a similar background to you. I wanted to go to university. I couldn't get in because my GCSE estimated grades weren't great. So I didn't bother studying for my A levels. And then I ended up straight out to work, and I got offered 2 jobs, one at 2,500 and one at 4,000. So one at 3,500 actually, which was a gross fine. So I got very excited and thought I'd take the one at 3,500. And when I got there, they paid me 4,000. So it was a great. So that was a bonus. So going back a long time, all these years.
Absolutely.
So you were incredibly structured. So I remember that you set up an AM and a PM. So AM, from memory, was sorting out. People weren't allowed to do viewings. They had to be on the phone. They had to be calling out. They had to be sorting out their diary, whether it's for market appraisals in the afternoon, viewings in the afternoon. Again, importance of structure and discipline, and why that AM and why that PM. And if you were an agent today watching this, would you advise now having a similar sort of structure?
I think structure is absolutely essential. I think it's the holy grail. And I'm still amazed that more people don't do it. I mean, I'll give you an example of what happened at Foxtons when we introduced structure. And the structure I introduced wasn't my structure. I was, I've been at Foxtons since I was 23. I didn't know it. It was a brilliant man called Peter Tobin, which some people will remember Peter. He was a tricky man, but he was a brilliant man. And he introduced structure of call outs and structure of determining when salespeople can do stuff was incredibly unpopular to begin with. But we increased turnover at Foxtons with 10 offices from 10 million to 40 million in 3 years. And we only added 2 more offices. It was revolutionary. And we structured people. 9 till 12 is call out. If you ask an estate agent to come in, and which is what we used to do at Foxtons, turn up, there's your desk, there's your phone, there's your car, get on with it, go and sell stuff, go and let stuff, do what you like. They'll faff around, they just do. Salespeople do. They'll know they've got a 10 o'clock in the morning appointment, and they'll get in and they say, well, it's 9 o'clock. Well, it's not much point doing call outs now. I'll make myself a cup of coffee and get the keys ready. 10 o'clock, blah, blah, come back, bit of traffic, park the car. Oh, it's nearly lunchtime, I'll go and get a sandwich. And so it goes on. So 9 till 12 was call out, and they had to book 5 appointments. They had to book 5 appointments during call out. This is at Foxtons. It was less onerous at Marsh and Parsons because it was a different market. We had less stock. But stock, I mean, God, wow. I mean, Islington office, we had 500 sales properties and 750 lettings properties. We had 38 sales staff and about 17 or 18 letting staff. So it was really, really quick. I mean, it was an absolute monster. South Ken, we had 350 sales instructions, all at 2.5% or 3%. So it was proper glory days. So unless you had a structure, you would be literally running around like a blue-ass fly, not knowing what to do and when to do it. So structure was important. And then we actually had an afternoon session of 2 till 4. So 9 till 12, call out, 12 till 2 viewings, 2 till 4, call out, 4 till 8 viewings. So it was a full day, another 5 appointments in the afternoon. At Marsh and Parsons, we had 9 till 12. We didn't do a call out. We didn't do a call out in the afternoon. Didn't need to, but it did mean that everyone was in the same place. Yeah, there was a buzz, an atmosphere of people making outgoing calls, people feeding off other people's energy. This is why I feel desperately sorry for all these people not in offices at the moment. I think offices are essential, especially in our business. They're absolutely essential. But the closer you can get people, I redesked Marsh and Parsons 3 or 4 times, various offices, because people were too far away, and I wanted to put more people in. And we went from meter desks to 3 meter desks or 2 meter desks to 1 meter desk to get them closer, so people can hear them and feel them, and feed off the energy. And same old question, but if you want something done, ask a busy person. It's essential for an office. Quiet silence is disastrous for an office. A structure is, if people looking at this or looking at this in the future, if you don't have a structure, you are missing out massively, and it's a real problem. Okay,
so we've got Assad here who joins us from location, and Assad said Peter Tobin was an absolute legend. We copied that structure from Foxtons and still have it in place today. I'm sure Green and Company with a Green Way did exactly the same thing. Where we found challenging is, and I'm sure there's some people on here, is they get the excuse, but I've got a valuation, somebody wants to see me at 10 o'clock and that's an instruction, I'm going to lose that. So how would you deal with that? Because I hear that all the time. So I'm very structured when it comes to talking about prospecting sessions, and what gets scheduled gets done. But then I get thrown back at me, but Stephen, I'm going to lose out on this one. Oh, this person can only view it at that time. No.
Bullshit.
So how did you? I agree. How did you drum it in to your team that actually that was a non-negotiable? This was happening between 9 and 10, and 2 and
9
4.
and 12.
9 and 12.
Well, I mean, obviously that's an obvious thing that people will say because they don't want to do it. But you turn it into a positive, which is when the person calls you up and says, I'd like to see you at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. You say, I'm really sorry, I've already got a 10. I can see you at 12. I can see you at 2:30. I could probably see you at 4, knowing you've got a completely blank diary. What it does is it wrests back control of the situation. Frankly, if I call someone up and says, oh yeah, mate, I can see you whenever you like, I'm thinking they're not busy, they're not important, and therefore they're seeing me as not important. So control of everything, control is essential in life, I think. If you can control the negotiating, control the viewings. So if someone wants to view something at 11 o'clock in the morning, so I'm really sorry, I've got a viewing already then. I can do it here, or here, or I could fit you in at 6. Yeah. And then they go, oh, blimey, this guy's busy. Now, obviously, if they say, look, it's a third viewing, I'm flying off to Los Angeles tomorrow morning to see my wife, and I'm definitely going to buy this, then you do it. It's 95%. It's not 100%, but you do. It enables you to gain control of the situation, and I think it's extremely useful. Any agent looking now that is literally saying yes to everything at the time that people want is missing a trick. Now, you may think it's a bit sneaky. Obviously, you go back in the end and say, look, okay, I'll call my 11 and see if I can swap it and try and fit you in. But again, it's not saying, oh, well, I'll fit you in then. It's building a story and a vision around who you are and what you do. You're not just some bloke sitting on a phone waiting for it to call, waiting for it to ring so you can make an appointment. You're a busy and important person.
Okay, rejection. How to estate agent. So if you don't like rejection, I know you're in the wrong business.
Don't be it. No, quite.
Don't be an estate agent. But there's a lot of people that, they don't want to prospect. They don't want to go through their customer base where the gold is, because they know that they're going to get no's and no's and no's. How were you able to change their mindset? What were you saying to them?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I won't pretend for a moment that it's an easy thing to do. It's not, and I hated prospecting. It's a horrible, miserable job. But it obviously has to be done. What we did at Foxtons, and what I suggest people do, is some people love prospecting. They're phone beasts. They love it. They don't really like getting out and seeing people, but they're great on the phone. So what we did, we set up a separate. We called it client services at Foxtons and at Marsh and Parsons, and it's a separate team of people that prospect. My view is, if you leave prospecting to, obviously, if you're a two-person office in somewhere, it's going to be much harder to do. And that being the case, if it's that, you're going to get together with someone like the call out and have a power hour, a prospecting session, so you feed off each other. It's not lonely and it's not depressing, and you have a whiteboard and you put your successes up there, blah blah blah. If you're a slightly bigger agency, I think you should definitely have a team of people, and by team it could be 2, whose job is, and it could be part-time now, and they could do it from home, whose job is to prospect people who've come into contact with your business over the past 10 years, if you like, but more likely 2 or 3 years, who you haven't dealt with. I used to joke at Foxtons that once you've registered with Foxtons, there is no escape. They will pursue you forever. And I still get calls from Foxtons saying, have you still got that flat in so-and-so, and what are you doing with it? And have you got a tenant in there, and blah, blah, blah. It is a brilliant thing. And again, medium-sized businesses, and that's 4 or 5 offices, who don't do that are missing a trick. They should have a team of people, because your managers won't do it. They won't do it very effectively. And they certainly won't do it 3 or 4 or 5 months later. They definitely won't. So I used to have a sort of, my analogy was, the manager, it's like the manager having a handful of leaves. Yeah. And all these leaves are people he's seen in the last 3 or 4 months. He or she is dealing with the nice compact bit in the middle, because these are people that are coming on and they're just finishing off their bathroom and they're going to be on next week. The ones that are flying off with the wind are people they'll probably never call again, who they have spent 40 minutes, an hour of their time chatting with them in their house, trying to close the deal. I'm not ready yet. And they'll probably never call again. If they're honest with themselves, they'll probably never call. It's not a fun job. They don't really like it. So hand it on to someone who can almost institutionalize it and have a brilliant method of keeping in touch with these people perfectly. And then it'll come back and they feed it back into the front end when it comes in 6 months later. And at Marsh and Parsons, it was at least a £3 million a year business, and we had 10 people in it.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned earlier that you were very good at getting 2.5% and 3% fees. Okay. At the moment, it looks like we're in a race to the bottom with some agents, and there are some agents that are charging, you were charging 2.5%, 3%. Other agents, I'm sure, were competing against you, may have been 1.5% and 2%. Is it mindset? Is it a skill? And what's the skill to demonstrate that you are worth 2.5% and 3%?
Again, it's not easy. I won't say, oh yeah, you should just say it and do it. It's not easy. But don't think. I mean, we were at 2.5% at Foxtons in Fulham. We're actually. I joined when Foxtons launched their first ever 0% commission free. And we had 390 instructions in 3 months. That you can guess how busy that was, all free. But then we went from free to 2.5%, which was, and we kept. It was a long time ago, 30 years ago, but I seem to remember we kept like a huge proportion of that. So don't think it was a massive beast of Foxtons in those days that could charge 2.5% because we're so big. We felt big, because we did enormous amounts of advertising, the magazine, the boards, everything we did brilliantly and not brilliantly, but you know what I mean, aggressively, and we did a lot of it. So we made people think we were bigger than we were. But going back to focusing on that, I think, as I said, it's not easy. I think the first question you ask is, are you going to judge me on my fee? And if the answer is yes, then you've got some arguing. But 9 times out of 10, my first question is, so why have you invited me in? And don't forget, I haven't valued for about 20 years. I don't think I've sold a house for 20 years, more than that. But my first question was, why did you invite me in? And they'll say, oh, well, because so-and-so said you were fantastic. Brilliant. I'm several rungs up that ladder. And I've got chances. So again, people are going to have their way of doing it, and obviously the same old is, well, if I negotiate on my fee, how do you expect me to negotiate a good price on your house? I think that's argued properly. That makes sense, and it is logical. But I think you can say we're not a discount agent. If you're here looking for the cheapest agent around, it's not us. It's not what we're about. We're not just about price. We're about value. And if we give you value, and value means getting more for your house than anybody else and giving you a fabulous service, then I'm afraid our fees are what they are. Bang. And our fees at Marsh and Parsons, blended average fee, and we were 1.7% north south of the river, and 2.25%, 2.5% north of the river. Obviously, we weren't as big a machine in those days as Foxtons, but our average fee was 2%. And I know for a fact most of my competitors were 1.5% and less. My finance director said to me once, really struck a chord, Peter, if you drop your fees from 2 to 1.5%, you have to sell 30% more property just to break even, just to stay the same. So it's a mug's game. It's not an easy one to do, but you have to battle for it and don't give in and be prepared to walk away.
So brilliant advice. So what training would you give your listers? What training would you give your negotiators about actually negotiating? Because for me, it being a skilled negotiator is what I'm paying. If I'm a
Yeah.
vendor or I'm a landlord, I want a skilled negotiator on my side to put more money in my pocket or to maximize my investment. So what training did you give to the listers, your negotiators in your office?
Well, we only had the managers were the only people, the managers and the valuers were the only people that valued. So I hear and understand in some agencies, or many agencies, probably, if you pick up the phone and they say, I want to sell my house, you go. Well, I think that's mad. You need to sell your number one. You need to send your number one striker out, not your defender, to score the goal. So that's the first thing. We had, I mean, once again, you don't sort of go to a estate agency school and pop out the other end as a fully functioning estate agent. It is all about experience. So we had a lot of role plays and meeting with people. The first 2 weeks of a Marsh and Parsons employee was with our training department. A week absolutely in the department and a week out in an office with someone. And I think genuinely, and I'm not just saying this because I'm with you, Stephen, one should invest in training. It is essential. And to think that I think it's a false economy not to, let's say that. And I know, for instance, I'm a great mate of mine, Dale Norton, and Peter Knight. Peter Knight did huge amounts of training at Romans, and it's pretty obvious why Dale sold for the price he did and why they're such a bloody good agency, because they take it seriously. And if you don't spend money on your people, I think you're doing yourself a massive disservice.
So talking about people, as a boss running an agency, running Marsh and Parsons, I would assume that was one of your biggest challenges, going out and recruiting the right people. So
Yeah.
what did you look for when you were recruiting? And there's people on here. Are there any great questions that you found that would work for you to find out a bit more about the people?
Well, in the early days, I mean, I would never not see anyone. I saw every single person, including PAs, secretaries, front of house, that came into the business. There's no way I would let someone into the business that was anti-culture. And anti-culture to me is don't give a shit. And, well, we've been through it, dressing badly and not understanding, what their job is. So, I mean, I've interviewed thousands and thousands of people. My Foxtons interviewing was literally we had drinks parties, which we had 20 people 3 times a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, at 7 o'clock in the evening into Chiswick Park, at least 20 people, and I would work the room. They'd have a drink, a bottle of beer or a glass of wine, and I would work the room and chat with pretty much everyone. Just, hi, how's it going? What are you up to? Blah blah blah. Almost speed dating. And then one by one, they would go out and spend 10 minutes only with one of the directors, one-to-one, and we'd photograph them. And at about 9 o'clock, we'd stick all the pictures up on the wall, and literally we would say, yes, no, 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 yes, 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 no, and we'd offer them jobs the next morning. So I think one could, those are different days. As I said, we had, 60, 70 negotiators, so it was bums on seats. At Marsh and Parsons, it was a smaller company, and it was we didn't have nearly as many kids. Those were almost always university graduates, or not even university graduates, young people. Marsh and Parsons, again, I saw the vast majority of people, certainly to begin with, and until the people under me, or Lisa Jane and Patrick, had sort of understood what I was looking for. Then they saw people. But I'm a big believer in obviously asking them what they've done and how they're doing. I'm a big believer in what they've done in the past, and I don't mean at work. I mean socially. One of my favorite questions is, so what did you? Again, you're not going to ask this to a 40-year-old, but you're going to ask this to a 25-year-old. What did you used to do in your school holidays? And if it was, I used to sit in mummy and daddy's villa in the south of France, or it was, I used to go around, knock on the neighbours' doors and see if I could get a fiver for washing their cars. I'd get a flavour of this person and what drives them. I'd see what they did in their spare time. If they were chess champions, or they went out and did lots of team sports, I would probably be more on the team sports. Maybe I'm wrong, but I probably would be. So it's an attitude, it's a culture, it's a way of operating, and I think you can get a lot from someone by asking a few in-depth, like, what's the toughest thing? I'm sure these are standard questions, but what's the toughest thing you've ever done? One of my questions was, how would your best friend describe you? Another one was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how lucky do you feel? The people who answer 9 or 10, I'm happy with. If they answer 5, I would say they're victims, and I probably wouldn't have them in my organisation, because they're going to be. Now, again, there's different ways of looking at that. It's been I've said that to other people, and they say, "Oh, they're probably being more honest." Well, in a half an hour interview, you can't know everything about everybody. But it used to be quick. I rarely used to get them back for second interviews. Rarely, sometimes, but not always. And frankly, I never really let other managers interview them. I would literally say that he's right for Nottingham Gate, she's right for Chelsea, she's right for that, and I'd plonk them in.
And there's some people on here that sadly have been made redundant, and are now looking to get back into agency. As a leader of a company, what advice could you give people who sadly have been made redundant? Sadly, some need help so for them to come into an agency, what do they need to do these days? What would impress you today?
Well, it is always about impressing, isn't it? I mean, if you turn up for an interview like a victim, saying, "Oh," I'm sure people won't, but I've been made redundant, and it's so tough, and bosses don't want to hear that. They just don't. And whether you, I've always said, acting, selling is like acting. You're in the wings and you're thinking, "This is tough," and you're on the stage and you're right. This is me. And that's what an interview is. And it's sometimes difficult to see through it as an interviewer. As an interviewee, I would say you just got to be the same person you are. And if you are right for this, then you'll get a job again. If you're not right, you should try something else. Sadly, in my life, I have fired hundreds of people. Don't forget, I used to employ very young people, and it is very rare that I think I got it wrong, because it is so obvious when someone's right or wrong for this. And my way of looking at it is I'm doing them a favor, because they're in the wrong job. They're not doing the right things. They're not enjoying it. Now, obviously, you persevere with someone. I will always persevere with someone if they're trying hard and they care. But if they're not trying hard and they don't care, they've got to go quickly. And one of the things I used to say, the difference between a good company and a not a very good company is that both take on people they think are great. The good company gets rid of them if they're not. The bad company moves them. One of John Hunt's favorite expressions was never move a problem. If someone is a problem in one office, they're going to be a problem in the next office. Don't move them, get rid of them. And I know it sounds tough, but business is tough. And that's probably why I wouldn't get on in this day and age, whenever it seems that everyone has to be nice to everyone. It is not nice sometimes, and you have to make really tough decisions. And I would think at the moment, really right now, there's businesses out there that need to move people on. I know that's horrible, and they may have been with you for a long time, 5 or 6 or 7 years, but in your heart of hearts, they are drifting, and they shouldn't be there. And you've got to make room for someone that should be there and is going to do well and thrive, build your culture, and make you money.
Okay, so I know we've got a couple of people that are watching this. I've just got a question for you. What was John Hunt like to work with?
John, he was incredibly tough, but brilliant. He was brilliant. He transformed a state agency. He was a revolutionary. When I joined Foxtons, as I said, it was 9 till 9, 7 days a week. That was in a market that was 9 till 5 days a week. If you had to have been to public school or been in the army to be an estate agent in those days. It was so lackluster and so laid back and ridiculous. Actually, this was London I'm talking about. I'm sure it was different in other parts of the country. I can only comment on London because that's what it was. So I mean, he didn't just come in and say, we'll open an hour longer. He came in and like a raging tornado and absolutely ripped the market apart. And whatever you think about Foxtons, they have changed the way estate agency is done in this country in a massive way. They were an absolute huge explosion, a catalyst of what happened there. And I had a lot to do with it. I was his sort of bag man, if you like. I went out and did stuff, but he was the genius. He made things happen. He thought of stuff, and I delivered.
Okay, so another question is, I've got a couple of people in here that are just starting their businesses, going into estate agency. They've got other established businesses. What would you be doing now if you were opening an agency to get yourself out there, going as quickly as possible? So obviously you talked about the 0%. Nowadays, obviously we've got mobiles, Facebook, videos, so we can get our message out there very, very quickly. Is there any other tips that you can share at all, please?
Well, you've got to decide who you are and what you want, and it's if you're a high service, high fee agent, or if you're a Parnham high sell them cheap agent. You've got to stand out from the crowd. You've got to find something. I mean, at Marsh and Parsons, when we rebranded Marsh and Parsons, it was a the brand for most agencies in the country, I would guess, certainly 15 years ago, was red, green, or blue. That was pretty much it. Red, green, or blue. Their boards, their corporate colors, everything about them was red, green, or blue. Now it's changed slightly, and you've got a few purples and stuff like that, and it's got a bit trendier. But in those days, it was red, green, or blue. And so when the people I used to advise for the brand came back and said, Peter, we think your corporate color should be chocolate brown and red, I was thinking, no, it's not. But thank God, because in my view, the Marsh and Parsons offices really stood out. They were rich, they were classy, they were smart. Everything we did pointed towards smart, classy, on point. And I changed the marketing. To begin with, the market was flying, and it was a very soft and cuddly, and we had Mr. Marsh and Mr. Parsons, and it was all a bit nice. And then the market got tough, and we had much punchier marketing, which was big letters of "We will get you the best" in massive letters, price. That was it. No more fluff. I would say that most stuff that comes out from agencies is far too long and far too full of guff. It needs to be straight to the point. We have the ability to get you the most amount of money for your house. We've got buyers that will pay you the most amount of money for your house. Now, whether you have or whether you haven't, it opens the door, and that's all you need. You need to get in that door and show them what you can do. If you don't buy a ticket, you can't win a prize. So that's what your marketing is for. It's not for buyers at all, ever. Buyers will come to you if you have your sellers. It's all about the sellers. So we made people say canvassing letters don't work, and perhaps they don't these days, but they did massively when we were around in those days. And all the responses that aren't selling now go into that database, and you have your team of people that in 6 months' time are calling around saying, "We saw you 6 months ago. How's it going? Are you thinking of selling now?" It's not complicated. It is just relentless.
Okay, we're back to that word again.
Yeah.
Couple of final questions because I'm really conscious of time. So book recommendations. Any that you recommend that people who are watching that have helped you over your distinguished career?
There's a crazy one that I'm going to recommend, which is I was actually in Australia talking at a conference, and she was as well. And it's a girl called Barbara Corcoran, and she ran the Corcoran Group in New York. And she is an absolute pocket rocket dynamite. At the time, this was 10 odd years ago, in Port Douglas. She was, no, it wasn't, it was in Noosa. She was 60 plus, and she was an about 5 foot tall, an absolute dynamo of a woman. She was incredible. And she wrote a book called, wait for it, if you haven't got large breasts, put ribbons in your pigtails. I so recommend the book. It's a brilliant book. It's short. It's a 2 or 3 hour read, and it is about her building her business in New York and how she did and what she did. And it's a brilliant book. Yeah, it's a great book, and it's a great book for young people in business standing out from the crowd. I'll give you a spoiler. She employed the #1 agent in New York on 100% commission, and gave her a chauffeur-driven Bentley to drive around in. Why did she do that? She did it because everyone then talked about the fact that so and so had gone to work for the Corcoran Group. Wow, they must be amazing. So it was just stuff like that. It's a brilliant book, and I thoroughly recommend it.
Okay, that's now on my list. Thank you very much. Never heard of that. I've heard of Barbara, and I know she was at ARIC. I think she was at ARIC last year or the year before.
Was she?
Yeah, so I think they had her on a link there. So, but that's great. Final question then. You've obviously employed some real high performance people over the years. What are the 3 or 4 qualities that agents need to have to be a high performer in a estate agency?
I think it's just a high degree of everything we've been talking about. A high degree of grit, determination, the ability not to give up. Because it's a really tough job. It's a brilliant job. I loved it, and I have no regrets. I think it's a fabulous thing to do. But you do get some massive knockbacks, and there's massive ups and downs. So grit and determination, the ability to chat to people without talk to people and converse with people naturally without seeming to be an obsequious creep. And so many agents are just disgusting, and they think what they need to say is just sort of say it's so unnatural. And so you treat people. I used to say, they're not a mate, they're not your brother, they're a cousin. You're friendly, but you're not over friendly, and you're not sort of cuddling them. It's a way of talking to people that doesn't come across as they treat you and see you as an advisor, as opposed to someone trying to flog them something. And it's a skill. It's a real skill. So, and in my experience, the most successful people are extremely natural and normal, not over the top. Obviously, it depends what you're selling. If you are on the pile them high, sell them cheap, 1-bed flat at 120 grand, and you do 20 a week, then it's probably not so important. It's a commodity. But in general agency, I think that's really important. And also sticking to your numbers. If you do make 5 appointments a day, you'll make money. Literally, you will make money. And how you do that, I don't know. You get in at 8 in the morning and catch people before they go to work. You stay an hour late from between 6 and 7 in the evening and catch people when they come home to make appointments for the weekend. I used to say, the people that we employed, I used to say, it's like running your business within our business. So it's really up to you with what you do. I don't pay you very much, but you can earn an enormous amount of money. And that's another thing. The opportunities need to be there. If they shoot the lights out and do incredibly well, they need to benefit from that, and they should benefit from that. So I had a stepped commission structure that moved up as they did that, and back when they didn't do as well, but it moved up. It's not just boring 10% across the board. As a salesperson, I don't think you're ever going to attract the right sort of people if it's just whatever you do, you're only ever going to earn 10%.
Brilliant. Look, you have been an amazing guest. Thank you. I'm really grateful for your time. Thank you everybody for watching. Really grateful as well for listening on the podcast. Next week I'm going to be joined by Ian Macbeth from Advocado Property in Berkshire, and Kay Logan from Bradley's down in the southwest country. So I'm looking forward to having them as guests. Thanks very much for watching. Have a great Thursday afternoon. Peter, thank you very much for being an amazing guest. some comments coming in, brilliant. Absolutely loved it. So incredibly
good.
grateful for your time and for sharing everything that you have shared. So thanks a lot. Have a great afternoon. Really appreciate it. Thank you all.
Okay. All right.